Is it okay to sit like this?
Can you stay more to your...
And I'm blocking the microphone with my foot.
Just don't put it. It's okay to catch everything you say. Everything's okay here.
Okay. So the first question would be, tell us a little about yourself and how did you get in touch with the world of backpackers?
Okay, we have a problem. Can you tap the mic? Okay.
You got something?
Sorry. Yeah, it's good. No.
So tell us a little about yourself and how did you get in touch with the world of backpackers?
My name is Brian Garish. I'm a long-term backpacker turned hostel consultant, which started actually back when I was 16 years old. My Spanish club in high school took a 9-day trip to Spain, which involved about 50 children, essentially, traveling with a few incredibly stressed out counselors to go over to visit a foreign country in a foreign language. I'm sure for them it was terrible, but for me it was life-changing. Going to see a completely new country, a completely new area, and something totally different from what I had grown up with. Basically, when I got there, I saw that it was a new life, something new and exciting that I could try, and I said, I have to come back and do more of this. So for the rest of high school, I worked as much as I possibly could to save up money. For every dollar that I saved for the trip, I would also save for college so I could convince my parents to let me go. And then came back, and I spent the summer between high school and college. The intention was to simply go back and visit Spain, but it turned into a lifelong obsession with backpacking. Traveling around independently, going where I wanted, when I wanted, my first taste of freedom.
Okay, but what was your initial career choice?
I started off studying zoology and Spanish with the intention of becoming a zoo vet. I wanted to become a veterinarian, specialize in exotic cats, and travel the world from zoo to zoo, bouncing all over from country to country.
Okay, then how could you describe a hostel in a few words?
At its core, a hostel is social accommodation. It's a place where everything is shared, whether that is sharing your lives and your stories, or your living space, sharing your food, sharing your time in the city. At its core, it's all about the sharing. Technically, a hostel would be a place where an individual traveler can purchase one bed for a night. They don't have to book an entire room like a hotel, and a hostel would then have, like I said, shared facilities, common area, common bathrooms, common kitchen where a traveler can cook their own food, and by definition they must have dormitories, shared accommodation where you would come in, like I said, and buy just one bed instead of booking an entire room.
Okay, tell us about the first hostel you managed.
The first hostel that I managed was the Gold Coast Hostel in Lagos, Portugal, which was kind of a gift handed to me at one point. I went intending to work in a different hostel. This one was then shown to me, and the owner said, you're a backpacker, I'm not. You're into hostels, I'm an investor, therefore you're the boss, I'm just the owner. You do what you want to do, make it your baby, and just handed me a beautiful brand new property. It was gorgeous. It was in the middle of this sunny beach town, parties everywhere. It was amazing. The people that came through were, as I was considering, the best of the best of the backpackers. Because it was a bit of a party town, we established ourselves as a non-party hostel. There was no less party with us, but we just didn't party in the hostel. It was somewhere else. So we had all the folks that had been long-term backpackers traveling the world. They wanted something a little different from going off and getting drunk. They wanted the cultural aspect. They wanted to meet the people. They wanted the interactions with the locals, with the travelers, and of course then they also wanted the beach. And so the hostel was small. We had 43 beds, and we were full every single day. Everyone who came in would extend their stay no matter what. So generally, as people arrived, they'd say, well, how long are you staying? I think 2 days. Right, we'll need to extend that by at least 2 more days. And then normally they did.
You said backpackers, but how does a backpacker differ from a regular traveler?
Backpackers tend to have a much more open schedule. In many cases, they're going to buy a one-way ticket to start a trip and not really have plans to finish it. Their travels go until either the money runs out or until they're tired. Generally, they don't get tired of it, so it's a question of the money, but even then there are ways that they find. But a backpacker tends to be, in my opinion, the greatest kind of people on earth. They're folks who go and intentionally remove themselves from their comfort zone to go off and travel the world with open minds, open hearts. They want to see what is out there and learn from it. They tend to be the most open-minded people, and they travel extensively. They travel with open schedules. If they get to a city and they like the place, they stay. Or if they get to a city and say this isn't my taste, they leave. And they're not stuck in a rigid schedule. They're not like package tourists. They're not going for just a week and they've got 1 week to see 14 cities. They'll take their time, and that's what differentiates them from regular tourists.
So, if you're saying that the first hostel you managed was in Portugal and it was successful and different, what made you leave that hostel in the end?
Ultimately, the only problem I saw with that hostel was that it was not my own. I was working for somebody else instead of running my own hostel. The city itself was also changing. I had noticed that the parties had gone from crazy to insane, which becomes a lot more difficult to manage when everybody then at the end of the night comes home from insanity because they tend to bring it with them a little bit. But the real reason that I left was that I wanted to go and start my own hostel. And I knew that as much as I loved that place, if I stayed for another year, another 2 years, another 3 years, I would be too attached and would not be able to cut the ties. So I said, it has to be now or else I'm never going to open my own hostel.
And I'm imagining you traveled quite a while, visited. Actually, tell me how many countries did you manage to visit up until now? What made you stop to Romania, and how did you end up in Romania in the first place?
I have no idea how many countries I've visited until now. For as long as I've been on the road, I would say probably a shockingly small number. Rather than bouncing from place to place, I tend to go and settle in for a little bit. If I go to a city, I don't want to spend less than a week there because part of the time is just adjusting to the travel itself and getting there, and then you have to get situated, and only then do you go off and explore the place. So I tend to settle in wherever I go, and it's not uncommon to go and spend 6 months in a place and then move on. So I've seen much of Europe, but there's so much more that I haven't seen. Every day I talk to more people, and the list of places where I have to go gets longer. So I don't have a long list of countries that I'm ticking off saying I've been there, I've been there, I've been there. When I go there, I want to stay. Romania I actually didn't even have on my list of places to visit. Backpacker wisdom suggested that I should avoid Romania entirely. Backpackers love to tell each other, don't go to Romania, it's dangerous, you're going to get mugged, you're going to get kidnapped, it's full of gypsies, it's a scary place, you should go around it. Go to the north, go to the south, go over, but definitely don't go through Romania. And now that I've been here, I realize what utter crap that advice is. Normally coming from people who have never been here, they heard it from a reliable source, which means a backpacker who heard it from a backpacker who heard it from a backpacker who didn't go but thought about it. The way that I ended up in Romania, quite simply, I met a girl. Long story short.
Yeah, but what? Wait a second, I forgot my idea. So, what's the general point of view on hostels? Especially in Romania, now that you got to work settle in quite a while and get to know the people.
The point of view on hostels varies greatly depending on who you're talking to. We can restart this one.
Yeah. I want to ask you first about how you manage to keep in touch with your family, and especially being from the U.S., being miles away. Okay. So now that you settled in for it's been a few years since you're in Romania. How did you manage to keep in touch with your loved ones and your family?
I didn't. The main ways that I stay in touch are through email, through Facebook, and through Skype. But to be quite honest, I have my quarterly call home where I get a long discussion with every member of my family, and from that point, we take a while. You know, for them, life moves a little slower than it does for me. I know that my mom's a teacher. She's going to have challenges with school. I know that there are vacations, there are projects. My father is a police officer. His day-to-day life is not exactly normal because you never know what's going to happen on duty. But I have a general idea of what's going on. So it's I don't know, it's not necessary to talk every single day and say what's new. For me, they know at this point that I've settled in Romania. I'm not bouncing to a different place. So every time I called home, it used to be, so where are you now? Oh, right. When I called home and said, you know, oh, I'm in Romania now, they said, right. That is still in Europe, isn't it? It's okay, you can come through.
Gazelle.
Okay.
I just don't want to disturb.
Unfortunately, I would say that I don't have enough contact with my friends and my family back at home. That's the one thing on the road that's difficult, is not being in touch.
So what's the general point of view on hostels in Romania?
It depends entirely on who you ask. If you talk to a backpacker, they tell you that they're great. They tell you there's a thriving hostel scene every city that they go to. There's at least one hostel, if not several, to choose from. From that perspective, it's wonderful. If you ask a random Romanian, either they're going to ask you, what's a hostel? Or they're going to tell you, yeah, there's a hotel right down the street. It's not just a Romanian thing, but there's definitely a misconception about what a hostel is. Many people have no idea what a hostel is, or they have the wrong idea. In the United States, a hostel is considered a brothel, or it's a halfway house, or it's a homeless shelter, or even an orphanage. In many countries, a hostel is a university residence hall, and in many places, simply a hotel. So there's a lot of misconception out there about what it truly is, and not a whole lot of good information. I went to a conference recently and was discussing the image of hostels, and I made a comment that, you know, in Romania, people think that a hostel is just a hotel that's spelled wrong, which of course ended up getting sent out and quoted and put out on Twitter and Facebook immediately after I said it, which was not exactly my intention. I was not trying to knock the Romanians, because my point was that I hear the same thing from the Hungarians, and I hear the same thing from the Bulgarians, and I hear the same thing from the French and German and Americans and Japanese. I hear the same thing everywhere, where they say, my local community doesn't know what a hostel is. So among the travelers, no problem. Hostels are the place to be. With the locals, generally they have no idea.
Și eu să-mi iau laptopul.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Mulțumesc frumos.
I don't think I'm giving you any funny stories. This is very dry. That's what happens when I try to keep it short. Okay.
So what are your plans for the future regarding the hostel industry now, especially now that you're in Romania and maybe you would want to make a change starting from here, or do you have any plans to move in and continue your life as a backpacker somewhere else? How, what would be the first step?
Well, I'm always interested in continuing as a backpacker. You know, any chance I get to travel, I'm going to take it. But luckily, I can still be based here. I can have a home base to kind of use as my springboard when I go off to go on other travels. As far as the hostel industry goes, luckily we're very well connected online at different events, regardless of where I'm from, whether I'm here in Romania or anywhere else. We can still work together. The future that I see for hostels is kind of a collaborative effort to bring all the hostels together all over the world, regardless of geography. Bring them together to share ideas, to share experiences, and work together for the betterment of not only the hostels, but for most importantly the backpackers that are guests.
No, it's fine, it's okay, it's natural. Because we have lots of sounds from here anyway,
Yeah.
so
Showers and doors, and
doesn't matter.
Suna constructor, Suna constructor.
Yeah. Don't worry about it.
You should say I should call my dentist, but I'm not memorized that word.
Do you want to add something else to it? Do you have anything else to add, or do you want to jump to the next?
We could jump to the next one because I forget if I had any other ideas. Lost my train of thought there.
Happens to everybody, including me. So if there was one wish to ask of the community of the backpackers and hostels out there, what would it be?
One wish to ask of the community of backpackers and hostel workers. Book your reservations directly with the hostel. Yeah, I don't know, for the backpackers out there, not so much for the current backpackers because they're already there, but for those who are considering backpacking, go. What I ask of them is to book their ticket, book it one way, and go. Backpacking is not as expensive as people might think that it is. A lot of people find ways on the road to save a lot of money. For example, you go to a hostel, you can cook dinner for yourself, or you can join up with 10 of your new friends and you can all cook together. By the time you're done, not only have you had a great experience together, but you've saved money. You know, your entire meal is $1 instead of being, you know, something far more expensive. There are lots of ways to save money as you're traveling. So a lot of people think that it's too expensive to go off and travel, when in fact, for me personally, I spend more money when I go home to visit my family than I do when I'm on the road. So it's actually less expensive for me to be backpacking than to live in Ohio, which is not the most expensive of places anyway.
Okay. Guess we're done here.
Okay.
Go.
Okay, who's next?
Okay.